to have with us a dear friend, Sara Carter. Many of you know her. She's a national, international award-winning investigative reporter, doing all kinds of work. I also had the honor of serving on the Hispanic Leadership Conference with AFPI with Sara. Sara, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Pastor, for having me on the show. It's my pleasure and my honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you do in your investigative reporting. And now I know you were recently with a dear friend of ours, Michelle, in Israel, and your love for Israel. Last week, you were doing interviews on the ground in New York City on a pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas rally for Sean Hannity. We all got to see that. It looked like you were in the middle of a war zone. Can you describe what was happening and how you felt that day?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was asked to go on an assignment, which I do normally, cover everything from immigration and our border crisis to obviously what is happening right now with our ally in Israel and the horrific terror attacks that took place last Saturday. What was surprising was the amount of people in the United States that were going out onto the streets the day that Hamas called for the day of terror, a day of rage in the world. And this is a terrorist organization that brutalizes innocent people. And so I was stunned when I was in New York City. Sean said they're expecting a protest. We'd like you to get out there and really get out there, do your thing, ask the tough questions, stay safe, and just get as much as you can, as much footage as you can for the American people about what is going on here in New York City. So I agreed to it. I went out, I was in Times Square, and then I walked down to 42nd Street where the large contingency of pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, I like to say, people were, and it started to grow. It was at first a few hundred, then 500, then it looked like it was over 1,000, then it looked like it was a few thousand. Then there were people driving down the streets, even some of the streets that had, they had to veer traffic off with Palestinian flags hanging out of their cars. And they were, enraged and angry at Israel. And and then there was a small group of Israelis, like this is right on the corner of 42nd and I think Broadway, but it was on the corner of 42nd. And I saw this small group of Israelis that had come out to counter protest. And between me and the small group of Israelis, it was like we were overwhelmed in numbers. This is the most dangerous situation for any journalist. And it's hard for young journalists. I've been covering stories now for 20 years. I've been in the war zones. I spent a good portion of my career, actually almost 8 years, in and out of Afghanistan, covering the war in Afghanistan on the front lines with our troops for the Washington Times and the Washington Examiner, USA Today, US News World Report. I was up in Iraq covering ISIS right before ISIS was taken down. I went past Mosul. I know the dangers of covering these extremist terrorist organizations and what it requires to be, at least to mitigate harm in a war zone. You can't always do that. Crowds like this can turn into rioters. They can flip upside down on you like that. You have no idea what is going to set someone off. And that is the danger of covering these stories. It's always, walking on eggshells. Situation like Palestine and Israel, of course, I used to think that's just over there. And then there's maybe feelings over here that we discuss, that we talk about in a democracy, that we lay out on the table in, trying to assess what is happening in other countries. What I saw this time from Dearborn, Michigan to the streets of New York was imported hate. This isn't about Israel, Pastor. I tried to think of it that way, but it's not. This is about anti-Semitism and the hatred of the Jewish people. I said it. I'm being frank. This is not about Israel. Israel is an excuse in this battle against and this hate towards the Jews. And I saw that in the rhetoric that was being spewed by the people that were on the streets, by the young and the old. I could hear it in the mouths of Americans that were buying into this Palestinian genocide story when the people that were targeted and killed were the Israeli people who were not doing anything but having a concert in one place, eating dinner in another, talking to family and friends, walking in their communities, being normal citizens in their kibbutz, trying to enjoy their daily life. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, come men in parachutes with weapons and busting through the fence lines that I had seen just 2 months ago with Michelle and Jew Exit and great people like Ronnie Wexler and Tom Trento and others. As we were walking along the border with IDF officials and learning about their security system, all of a sudden, what happened in Israel last Saturday was an attack on the human conscience, on the human spirit, on innocent lives. I have not literally, like many Americans, because I believe there's so many of us out there that know this is wrong. We are spiritual people. I have a deep faith in God. I have a deep faith in Christ, despite all of these horrors that we've seen. But it is very difficult to sleep at night when you know another mother in the world had to shove her babies in a drawer while her and her husband were being executed. And coming back, and that's just so many stories of horrors and rapes and just the monstrosity of what happened. But to be in a crowd in New York City and to stand there and to hear that same hate being spewed in our nation really, really put me into a state of disbelief, a state of shock. And I not only heard that same anti-Semitic horror that I could only imagine at that moment. I mean, that man called me a Zionist pig. He didn't know anything about me, but he used rhetoric that was horrible. And this woman, screaming, and people that inflamed hatred coming through. I said, God help us. God help us, because the hate is here. It's here now. It's here in a way that we cannot even imagine or reconcile with. And I just had to, we talked about it before we started the podcast, but I had to take a shield. People said, how did you remain so calm and ask those follow-up questions? Weren't you scared? And I said, you know what? I had to shield myself with God and with the strength of my own spirit and my faith in God, and say to myself, I have an important mission here, and that is to expose to the world, without me hardly even opening my mouth, what is happening on the streets in America. And I think that message got through loud and clear.
Yeah. At this point, just because not everyone saw that clip, we'd like to show just part of that interview for people to get a sense of what you experienced. If we can show the clip now, Alan.
How do you respond when people say, look, these babies were beheaded, some of them were burned to death, there were children that were killed? Why not speak out against that and then, protest later? Why protest now?
Because they're already killing hundreds of lives right now, even as we speak. And we're protesting until something ends, something stops for us,
Do you think it's going to ever stop?
Well, the problem is, as long as Gaza is led by a terror organization, I don't see any difference.
Do you care about the babies that were beheaded?
No, they were never beheaded. That was a made-up story.
How do you...
Not true. It's show me the pictures now.
So what about...
Show me the pictures. You're a lying full of... You're full of...
They did not kill their babies. That is...
So no babies...
There's no validation of that whatsoever. There is no proof of that. Netanyahu is basically running his own narrative of what he wants to excuse himself.
How does this end?
By killing and genociding and holocausting all the Palestinians.
It's a shame that Hamas can stand here in the middle of New York City and say every day, this is crazy. I don't understand how the American people are not afraid from this guy. I don't understand.
One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Don't forget it.
Sarah, we have a few questions. It was chilling what we saw. We're going to present the view of there were thousands of people. And this was at the beginning. The only real crime was what Hamas did to innocent children, women, grandmother Holocaust survivors. Very concerned once, obviously, they have to go in on the ground, where it goes from here. So I have two questions. Number one, have you ever in the past, when Israel would go into Gaza, et cetera, ever seen this type of vitriol, these numbers that you're seeing, not only in New York, college campuses and throughout the United States? Why don't you answer that first? Have you seen this?
No. I mean, we've seen a rise in anti-Semitic behavior, and I think in the United States, and I think that's such a shame. It's so disgusting. It's so despicable. And I have to ask myself, how did this happen? I've never seen this before, but we've seen the attacks on the synagogues slowly but surely. We've seen the attacks on Jewish people in New York City. And we've seen the failure of the New York City, the local government to mitigate that, to stop that, to speak out against that. We've also seen people in our own government, Ilhan Omar, it's all about the Benjamin's baby. We've seen people like, AOC and others, Rashida Tlaib, spewing lies and hate against the Jewish people. I said to my husband, last night, it would be as if I was attacked and raped. Let's put it this way, feminists, maybe some of them will get it out there. Maybe some of them will be watching you and understand this, but it would be as if I was attacked and brutalized and raped. And somebody said, well, you know what? You have a pretty face. Your outfit was a little bit revealing. It's probably your fault. It's all your fault. And not only that, it's not only your fault. Now you got to pay the rapist because we really feel sorry for him because he can't control himself. And so now, we're going to just aid him in continuing this horrible process. I said, can you imagine what it feels like to wake up in the morning and to be an Israeli and to see people in other parts of the world, like in Germany, Molotov cocktails hitting a synagogue, or in America, people marching down the street supporting terrorism. It's not pro-Palestine. It's not about a two-state solution. I wish we could have shown every question that I asked, but there's only so much time on television. I asked people, where does this end? You know where most of them said it ended? With Israel being obliterated off the face of the earth. Obliterated. So, no, I've never seen this kind of hate. There is something happening in the world that it seems demonic. It seems unbelievable to me that even Americans wouldn't just say, oh my gosh, they ripped babies apart. They dismembered people. They set people on fire. They sodomized. They raped. They put it on camera and they played it to the world. And the world still doesn't want to believe it. Some people. Something is wrong.
Sarah, from the videos, it wasn't just Palestinians or people from Gaza or Islamists. There were progressive leftists in the crowd as well. How do you reconcile this coalition when, if they were living in the Gaza, certainly there's no women's rights. They'll be torturing anyone who's gay, et cetera, et cetera. what is this strange bedfellows? How is this happening?
I think we have allowed our universities and our school systems to become the bastions of lies and hate and ideological rhetoric that has basically brainwashed a majority of our children and our progressive left. You know, it used to be that the Democrats were the ones that stood up, and I say this all the time because I'm going to give, you know, a credit where credit is due in some cases. It used to be, you know, people like Frank Church spoke out against our, you know, intel agencies spying on Americans. They would be the first, the ACLU and others, to stand up for First Amendment freedoms, for the truth, to speak the truth, to be able to give Americans a voice. And it's completely reversed itself. It's flipped upside down, where Americans now, this progressive left has become a Marxist like establishment where they don't believe in freedom. They don't believe in holding the government accountable. In fact, they believe in allowing a government to control the populace. They want information, even in mainstream media outlets, many, to be delivered to them like this on a platter instead of seeing the truth with their own eyes. That's why I give, you know, so much credit. And I wish I could be on the ground with him, but to Trey Yanks, who is in Israel right now covering the war for Fox News. He's been amazing. He has done a yeoman's work of getting the truth out to the people, but people aren't listening. They have been brainwashed. So you did say that. You talk about regular Americans. Let me give you just, I know I talk a lot, but I'm so passionate about this. I was at Harvard and I was trying to get people to come on camera. And it was right after these attacks. And there were so many non-Palestinian, maybe I would say generations, Americans, European American, you know, whatever, here that were at Harvard, either were students or professors that did not want to speak out. And I said, well, why? I mean, you seem like somebody who wouldn't mind being on television. Do you mind if I just ask why? And they're like, look, we really don't want to get involved in their problems. And I said, no, I'm asking you to respond to at then it was 1,200. Now it's like much more than that. The 1,200 people that were slaughtered, that were killed, and all of those that were taken hostage, and the Americans. Yeah, well, I don't want to get involved in their arguments. I'm like, I'm asking you to respond to the death of people by a terrorist organization. Well, they don't really consider themselves terrorists. I'm like, wait a minute. Are they not even listening to me? Did they not see what I saw on television? Do they not want to stand up to evil? Is there no moral line anymore? Is it just gray space? How do we do that? As human beings, how is that even possible? Because even if it was a Palestinian child that was ripped apart, I would be the same right now as it is if it was a Jewish child. What happened that day was an attack by terrorists on innocent civilians. I've never seen Israel do that. I've never seen Israel's conduct like that. And I got to tell you, there was a woman, and it was like almost a gift from God. There was a man that showed up, and he was a Democrat, and he just laid into Harvard. He just let him have it. And he was not Jewish. He was a Democrat. He was not Jewish. And he said he was disgusted by Harvard. He was disgusted by the stance that they took. He was disgusted by the people that were around him. He was just, I mean, he was beside himself. And he was actually going to go at that moment to the Kennedy School because he was part of the administration. And then another lady walked up to me, and he went on camera, and I could see her. And she was kind of looking at me like she recognized me, and she was older. And I walked up to her and I said, my name is Sara Carter. I'm with Fox News, and I'm looking for anyone to just please stand up for, you know, what's happened in Israel. Just a person that can talk on the side of like against terror. Somebody who wants to speak out against terror, a woman. And she looked at me, and she had a Russian accent when she started talking. She said, I'm a Russian Jew. She said, I came, and she goes, I absolutely will talk to you. She said, my family and I left Russia because of growing anti-Semitism. and I was younger. And I came here and I went to Harvard believing in the American dream, believing in this university, believing in this institution. My family in the Soviet days and even before went through the pogroms. We were assaulted, the gulags, because we were Jews. And she said, I came to America for a different life. She said, where do I go now? So where do I go now? She says, I'm too old to fight in the IDF. I've spent my life at this university teaching. And this is what I get back for my university. This is how they stand up for me. And then she said, never again is supposed to be now.
Right.
And she said, it's not.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even talk anymore, Pastor. I had to walk away because I was literally so blown away by her testimony. And I thought to myself when she said that, all of these Americans who and people, not just Americans, just whoever didn't want to speak up for Israel at that moment, whoever just walked away and turned their heads, whoever just was an anti-Semite, whoever just allowed those children to die without even defending them, I said, I know exactly how people reacted in Germany now. I know exactly how people felt during World War II.